Okay, hi. Could you introduce yourself?
I'm Jim Campos of Carpinteria, lifelong Carpinteria, born and raised, 1948 I was born. Attended all the Carp schools. I have a relationship with every school in some way, professionally or having attended the schools. I graduated in 1966 from Carp High and proceeded to City College and to UCSB. Graduated UCSB in 1970, and from there went on and got I don't know, it just seems like every degree imaginable, culminating with a PhD in 1992, I think. And professionally, I was hired right out of UCSB by the Carpinteria Unified School District, specifically by Dr. William Carty, who Carpinteria being a small town, everybody knows everybody, and for some reason he seemed to have a belief in me and hired me right out of the university. To a position that I didn't have the credentials to do, but that's not uncommon in the history of Carpinteria, from at least as I've read the history. So I was just one more of those people that was kind of plucked out, and somebody decided that I would be good in the school system. And I hope I rewarded Dr. Carty's faith in me. But I started in the bilingual programs in what year was it? 1971, 72, right in there someplace. And
teaching in the bilingual, right?
Teaching in bilingual classrooms for about 5 years.
What grade level?
I taught first grade and second grade to begin with, although I had been a student teacher at the high school at Carpinteria under John Tissot, who was my mentor teacher and a lifelong friend as well, since that experience. So I started with the big kids and then went to the little kids. And then I think that was my calling, and I stayed at the elementary grades throughout, held a variety of positions, both administratively and in the classroom. From the classroom, I completed my PhD using the classroom as my laboratory for lots of interesting experiments on good teaching practices, especially in bilingual education. And eventually did get my doctorate, and finally had an opportunity after a number of tries to be a principal in the Carpinteria Unified School District, and my last 13 years were as principal of Maine Elementary School.
Tell me about bilingual education. When was it an issue in Carpinteria, and what were the pros and cons, and what was decided about it?
I think it was an issue from the get-go. I think the reason that we started a bilingual program was because there was money in it. And Dr. Carty was very good at finding sources of monies, to enhance the programs that he had in his school district.
Where did the money come from?
Initially, there was a grant that came out of county schools. And so Carpinteria, I think schools from the Santa Maria area like Guadalupe, Nipomo, they were also a part of it. But county schools set up a number of bilingual programs to start in about 1969-70, right there with the Title VII programs that came out of the Johnson era, Lyndon Johnson era. And so 69 is the date that's usually given for Title VII being enacted. And so county schools had monies to set up programs throughout the county, and Carpinteria was one of those schools that went ahead and said, yes, we'll let county schools come in. The interesting thing here is that county schools actually hired the teachers. The Unified School District, Carpinteria, had a say-so, but the employers for the bilingual teachers, the initial ones in Carpinteria, were paid from the Title VII program and out of county schools. I came in because there was a particular teacher that was a thorn in the side of the school district that was in bilingual education, and they wanted her out in the worst way, and somehow they succeeded in doing that. And so I was the pick to succeed this person and succeed that person. And it was very...
Do you want to say who that was, or do you want to go on the record?
First name was Loretta. She's a good person. I like Loretta. Can't remember the last name right now. But I mean, the interesting story with it, I don't know if it it helps this conversation, is that the first day that I reported on the job, I had a lot of not very nice looks directed at me from the people that were a part of this program. They had lost a valued and I think a well-liked employee because the Unified District didn't like that person, and they'd replace that person with me, and so I didn't know what was really going on, but there I am reporting, and I'm kind of an unwanted guy out of that program. But they quickly accepted me, and I two of the best years of my teaching experience were in that program. And I say only 2 years because one year. An interesting thing about my employment with the Carpinteria Unified School District is that I was there 35 years, and the district only counted 34 years. And the reason when I retired and they wanted to draw up my plaque that said, congratulations for X amount of years, they wanted to go with the 34. In fact, the 34 is what I think the board president, Terry Banks, used, which I had to correct. I said, it's 35, because they were not counting the year that county schools paid my salary. So it was actually 1 plus 34, all in the same place, 35 years.
Well, tell me about bilingual education. What were the issues, the controversy?
Well, I mean, it was obvious. I mean, the controversy, I think, has always been the English language versus Spanish language. And that the idea being that as if you teach the students to speak English as quickly as possible, that they will be integrated quicker and they will assimilate quicker and better, as opposed to using the home language to support the English, and especially, keeping Spanish out of the schools themselves and the instruction, that they're not a part of it, to using the home language to support the English, and especially, keeping Spanish out of the schools themselves and the instruction, that they're not a part of it. And when I interviewed, I supported that position. I figured I learned English quickly, and I did okay in the schools. That's what we should do with these kids. Well, I mean, the first day on the job, I quickly saw, what a faulty point of view that was. I mean, you couldn't communicate with the kids if you were just, trying to speak one language and not the other. And obviously you couldn't communicate with the parents if you took that position. So, I quickly understood, what the issues were and how we needed to approach, teaching these kids and helping them make a good transition into schooling, and it included, using Spanish as a support, and anyways.
So you had firsthand experience that using Spanish and English from native Spanish speakers helped facilitate their welfare in the school.
Absolutely. I mean, I went from one position and almost overnight just saw this doesn't work. This isn't good. And
then did you speak Spanish and English to them?
Yes. Well, and that was what the people from county schools wanted us to do anyhow. It was what the Carpinteria Unified School District didn't want us to do. So yeah, I very quickly became a convert into what they were doing, and very interestingly, one of the things, and before I go there, I do have to say that the years that I was in the classroom were quite contentious within the community, not about me in particular, but bilingual education. I remember a particular meeting where the community all jammed into the Canalino auditorium, or the cafeteria, whatever it is now, and it was the anger and the intensity of the meeting, both pro and con on bilingual education, was it looked like the whole community could just was combustible, with people getting very fighting with each other and that kind of a thing. It was not something that I had ever experienced, as a Carpinteria, as a person raised in Carpinteria. At that time, Dr. Carty, again, being somebody that continued to feel that I had a future in the leadership of education in Carpinteria, had appointed me when he kicked out county schools after 1 year. He told them to pack their bags, and he didn't want to have them be a part of the Carpinteria program anymore. And so I became the first bilingual director of Carpinteria Unified Schools. So here I am, as a first year teacher with county schools, having to go to the university while I'm teaching to get an elementary credential. I had the secondary, but I didn't have the elementary, so I had to get that. That was part of the conditions of my employment. I needed to have it, so I'm going for that. And in my second year, I'm the bilingual director. I don't even have the elementary credential finished yet, and I'm the bilingual director of the program. So,
what year are we talking about?
We're talking, I think, 72 or 73, one of those years. And so I'm a part of the position for the school district that bilingual programs are good for the district, or we're running our own program kind of thing. And we're in this meeting at Canalino School where it really felt like people were going to pull out guns or something. It was, and I'll always remember the day after Dr. Carty calling me into the district office and saying, "Jim, what happened? What was that all about?" and I said, I said, I think it was just citizens speaking their mind, and whatever. It's probably a natural process. I was shocked too. I just did not expect that kind of a get together, of a gathering. Going that way.
Why do you feel they felt so strongly?
Well, that was something that many years later, after Dr. Carty had retired, and after we began to learn about the years of segregation in Carpinteria, which ran from sometime in the 1920s to about 1947, there was a great segregation was a part of the community. And it was something that had happened before I was born, and it was something that had happened before Dr. Carty had come in as superintendent of Carpinteria schools. So to us, it was a history we weren't aware of. And when we both, much later in our lives, began to understand what had happened in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, it was natural. That was why that meeting happened. It was all those people that remembered those years coming together. Those that had felt that they had been discriminated in school, and those that were very much opposed to anything that was a dual language kind of a situation. All those forces came together and they combusted in that meeting.
Well, I can understand how the Hispanic people who were discriminated against would want bilingual education, but were they arguing with people that were against bilingual education?
Yes, and
was that for English only education?
yes, but the fact of the matter was that there were proponents of each side in each of the communities. There were Anglo supporters of bilingual education with Latinos, Mexicans, on one side, and then on the other, against it, there were many Latinos who felt exactly the way the Anglos did. So it wasn't one of those issues that was united by race at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then at some point, bilingual education was shut down. Is that what or stopped? Is that correct or?
No, I don't remember that.
I thought Tara told me. Was there a state mandate or something?
What you're referring to, I believe, is that at a certain point in time, I gave up the bilingual directorship, and Bob Keating took it over, a person that I had helped hire, and I shifted over to the Catalino School. And I had started at Aliso School. So after 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, I had moved over to Catalino. And at my time at Catalino, by my 5th year of teaching, Dr. Carty decided he had another position for me. So even though I had given up an administrative, quasi-administrative post as bilingual director, actually it was turned into a permanent administrative position, at least at that time. And so it was one of those things where Dr. Carty said, you know, it'll take you out of the classroom, you'll be working in the district office. And there are some reasons which I think I won't get into right here that I don't want to state that made me turn it down. And I said, no, I think I'd like to just go back into the classroom and teach. So I know it's more money and the whole thing, but it's not something I think I want to do. And so I went back to the classroom, in a bilingual classroom, Catalino School, and within 2 years, there's another position now, and that's the Early Childhood Learning Center directorship, which had been held by Lynn Perino. And Lynn had left the district for better things. I can't remember where exactly she went. I think she might have been with the State Department of Education or something, but she left. It created an opening, and Dr. Carty wanted me for that opening. So I went through the interview process there, and it shows you that if the superintendent wants to hire somebody, they can. I know they have all these committees and all these whatever, but when it comes right down to it, the superintendent makes the call, or can make the call. And in this particular case, he wanted me. And so he convinced the principal at Catalino, Phil Dunn, to have me become the new director, and Phil was okay with it, and so I became director. And when I became director, I think this is what you're referring to, within a very short period of time.
About when was this?
So we're in about 1975 or 6 when I become the director. When you become director, you have access to information, and I've always liked working with data, and so I began to look at the data of the children that would enter school.
But by the way, the mic's coming down just a little bit.
You're
fine. I see a little bit of your T-shirt, but it looks fine. Is that okay?
Oh, okay. I'm not.
Let me just adjust it slightly. I'm just gonna do this. Pull this a little bit. Okay. So you were saying?
Okay, I apologize actually for the length of because I guess I do have a story. I started going through the entry level data that we would collect on children, and ECLC, the Early Childhood Learning Center, was really a good program that I think Dr. Carty had actually helped bring in. A real, I think, feather in his cap for doing this. And he had, I don't know how the community felt about it, but he had created a kindergarten complex, this ECLC. And so every kindergarten student in the district, Summerland, Aliso, Maine, Catalino, all came into this complex that had been built. And the teachers had designed the classrooms, and so they just made classrooms that were far-sightedly, wonderful instructional classrooms with rooms that they had adjoining rooms with windows where you could peer into the classroom and not be seen, or you could use the rooms to have a small group of kids. And then within the middle of the ECLC, there was all the working areas for the teachers. So you had 6 classrooms with a workroom right in the middle, and all of the teachers could talk with each other, work there, and go back into their classrooms. And it was a wonderful place to work. And so I took over for Lynn Perino as the director of that program. And they would give an incoming test to every children that entered kindergarten. Can't remember the name of the test, but it was half a developmental test, and it was half a knowledge test. So developmental, it was things like how could the kids cut with the scissors, or how they could draw draw a person or draw themselves, how they saw themselves. And you could see from their small motor and large motor skills their level of development age-wise as they went in. And then from the knowledge part of the test, it was things if they knew their alphabet, knew their numbers, knew their colors, their shapes, things of that nature. And they combined this little test into a way of grouping the children as they entered kindergarten. And so you tried to kind of make it, what do you call it, integrated, is that the right word? You had many multi-levels of kids all in the classroom, and they were evenly distributed. At least that was the idea. These tests were a great source of information. And I found out by going through them and turning them into statistical graphs and things that the white kids, the Anglo kids, did very well on the test, typically. There weren't too many that did poorly on the test. The Latino kids did more poorly on them, and children that were coming from a home where Spanish was the predominant language, was the dominant language, did terribly on it. And it did not matter where the kids had been prior to entering school. It didn't matter if they'd been in a preschool program. It didn't matter if they were homeschooled. It didn't matter if they had been tutored. It didn't matter if they were doing anything with the kids. All of the kids that came in with Spanish as a first language did terribly on that little pretest. So they were all at the bottom of the barrel as they came in. And so, I mean, your thought is, well, if Head Start is available for these children in the community, if there was the CAC program, Community Action Commission had a program that also schooled these kids before they came in, the preschool programs. There were the Lou Grant Parent-Child Workshop, Kinderkirk, all these programs were going. It didn't matter if the kids were in those programs or not, the Spanish-speaking ones. When they came in, they all did poorly. And so my thought was, well, if all of these programs are doing this poorly, there's got to be a better idea. I mean, why are we doing these things if none of them work? And so I decided to try a real radical approach, and probably gave me a very bad name in Carpinteria, and probably kept me from being able to get a principalship until after I got a PhD. And then at that point, I could be taken seriously, kind of. But prior to that time, I'm probably responsible for a lot of the things that happened, in the bilingual programs in Carpinteria.
Which was what?
Which was, I had, because I was so closely tied to the university, I was, going after master's degrees and a bunch of things, and I was reading the work of a Canadian, what do you want to call it? Well, bilingual, dual, multilingual, a linguist. His name was Jim Cummins, and he worked out of Ontario. I can't remember the institution that he worked from, but his hypothesis at the time was that for children to do well in school, to reach a level of proficiency in second language learning that was equal to the first language, that those children had to have a very strong foundation in their home language. So it didn't matter, what the language was, but whatever the home language was, had to be a language that was rich in what he called cognitive, academic, linguistic skills. And so I thought, if none of the programs that the Carpinteria community is offering work, why don't we take Cummins' hypothesis or theory, if it had reached that level, and implement it. Let's do it, and let's see what happens. So we wrote, and I wrote it with Bob Keating, because Bob was the bilingual director now. I'm the ECLC director, so it's the two of us. We sit down and we write a proposal to Washington. Jimmy Carter was the president at the time. And so his people were pretty receptive to programs like this that were experimental and pretty innovative. Nobody had done this, as far as we knew, especially with Spanish. There were German schools. There were a lot of other schools in the United States that had used other language approaches, but to just take Spanish.
So your program was just Spanish then? Or?
We decided to go totally radical and begin a preschool program where we were going to make Spanish the primary language of learning. On the taking, again, Jim Cummins' theories, his theories, I guess, is the right way to put them. And so we tried to get these kids to learn to speak their own language first as something that would then help them learn English. That was the idea.
And did it work?
It worked. It was amazing. I mean, we were fortunate. I could go into another whole story and keep you here for another hour, which you don't need to know. But we hired a lady named Betty Bautista. But she, I do need to speak about what she did. She was a teacher renowned in her home country of Colombia. She had moved to the United States with her husband and just happened to be living in Carpinteria at the time. Her daughter came to one of these meetings where we were talking about this program that had been granted us. Our proposal had been accepted, and so we were looking for a teacher who could teach in Spanish and teach the kids a language as a way to facilitate English. So, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so we got to know her, and she, to this day, she is the finest teacher that I have ever worked with. And so there's a long story behind the hiring, and it's a good one, but we'll just say we hired her. And she came in, and the first thing she said, these kids don't know their own language. She says they don't have greeting language. They don't even know how to introduce themselves. It's a very rudimentary, basic language that they have. Well, they're coming from poorer homes. Their parents are uneducated, and the parents didn't really include the children in their conversations or take them to parks and zoos and things like that and teach them the language. I mean, when you have your own children, you know that you go places and you teach. If you go to the zoo, you're saying, that's a giraffe, that's a lion, or whatever it is, and you're teaching vocabulary. Anyways, that didn't happen, and she saw it right off the bat. And she said, we have to start with these kinds of programs that introduce them to their own language first. So she did that. She came up with just some amazing programs.
What was her name first?
Betty, Betty, and then Bautista, Bautista. And anyways, we started the program, the first year's program, late because we had such a hard time hiring the teacher. There were forces in Carpinteria that did not want us to hire Betty because she didn't speak English. That was the thing too. We had one administrator, my principal at the school at Canalino, was Joy Berger at the time. She's a nice lady. I love Joy. But she said, over my dead body will we have a person at my school that cannot speak English. And I was able to convince Dr. Carty that this was the person that was going to help us succeed. And there's a long story to that too. But anyways, he went along with it. And we started the program, and we did not begin the program until January. So we're almost at the halfway point of the school year when we start this first program. In the 4 or 5 months that she has with these kids, when she finishes her year, and we begin to test the kids on that little kindergarten screening, the scores of the kids coming out of that program shot way up. And so we compare those scores to everything else that's happening in the community, and it's night and day. These kids are coming in with language skills. And by the second year, where we had a full year's program, the scores have just shot through the roof. And then the third year, again, same thing. And there was an entire cultural change that happened in the school.
And was it Spanish only with these kids, or was there some point where it's bilingual?
They begin to pick up, the better you know your home language, the easier it is to learn the second language. The kids are picking up English quicker, and so when the cultural change that I talk about that we made was that the teachers in the Early Childhood Learning Center that were receiving these children are saying, these kids are smart. They know their colors, they know their numbers, they know this. They can use the school materials. We changed a complete mindset. In that obviously they were viewing these kids as dumb when they were coming in, because now they're saying, these kids are really smart. So it was like they had a whole brand new kind of student to work with. Kids that could understand what was expected of them in the classroom. And what you're talking about something ending, that you thought that maybe it...
Well, but up to then, at that point, it was Spanish only for these kids who were Spanish speakers at home. It wasn't bilingual in the class.
Well, no, they were being, in the preschool program, we hired a person of equal rank to Betty. Bev, what was Bev? Is it Bev? Oh, I can see her. So Forsyth, Bev Forsyth. And she was made the actual director of the program. She didn't speak any Spanish, but she spoke English, obviously. And she was a wonderful person. And between Beverly and Betty, the two of them made just a perfect combination. So Beverly would instruct things in English and whatnot. So the kids, it was a bilingual program, but Spanish was the emphasis. That it was the base. We were laying this real strong base.
So what I was talking about, you're going to say? Why did it all stop?
Oh, because at the end of 3 years, we are producing data which is unheard of, that other people have not witnessed. And we became very famous very quickly. People across the United States knew who we were. People around the world knew who we were. The people who we had used as the basis for doing this program, the university people, the guy from USC. My old age, I can't remember that. But anyways, we had a number of professors who were into bilingual education. Kenji Hakuda is another one I remember. Obviously Jim Cummins. They took notice of what we were doing. And they immediately started visiting, and anyways, they started writing very nice things about us. So we got known. And so we thought, okay, we've started something very, very good here. Well, at that time, Ronald Reagan had become president. And so, as you can imagine, conservative Reagan administration has very different views on what we were doing. And so we thought, okay, we're going to write a new proposal. We've got statistics now that we have data now that confirms that we're doing something very important here. So we wrote our next proposal to get an extension and keep it going, and the Reagan administration said no. So we were ended. And so we had to, we had a year where the program was closed.
And so the program was closed by who? By
the money ran by Washington, the federal government. It was I'm sure it was tied to Title VII, but the Reagan people said we don't want to fund a program like this, so they took our money away.
And what was Title VII?
Title VII came out of the Great Society program of Lyndon B. Johnson. There were, I forget how many titles. Title IX is one that's, people remember because it's the girls in sports. Title VII was one which was meant to lift Latinos up by the bootstraps and have them do better in schools because they had never done real well. I'm not even really sure, as I talk to you right now, if Title VII was really intended as a program for migrants, but more to have Latinos, do better. But somehow it became a program mostly for homes where Spanish was spoken and you were trying to get kids to learn English. So we were out for a year because the Reagan administration wasn't going to support this kind of a program. It had to be English only, which is, again, when I came in, that was my point of view. And, I'm totally on the other side at this point, and probably not very popular among many parts of the community as a result. But because we had gained such notoriety, or there were people that were very interested in us. And within a year, the Goleta program, which had a state preschool program, and having a state preschool program was like having gold. There was only X number of spots. And so no new state preschool programs were ever opened up. You didn't just create new ones at that time. If somebody went down and they created 20 spots, there would be 20 spots for somebody to have those 20 spots. Well, Steve Minjares, who was running a program in Goleta, he had visited our program, he liked our program a lot, and he had lost, I forget, 20, he was going to have to give back 20 to 40 spots because their population was kind of shrinking. And so he recommended very strongly that those spots be turned over to us. And so within a year we're back up and running, and now we're a state preschool program. And from there, and I'll cut at this point, but we got known everywhere. I spoke all over the United States. I spoke at a governor's conference in St. Louis, Missouri, where I was actually put into the presence of some aspiring young governors from throughout that area. Rudy Perpich was one I remember from Minnesota because he became something later. John Ashcroft, what was he for the Bush administration? He became the Attorney General?
I think so.
Yes. I have a letter thanking me for speaking there from John Ashcroft. I still have that in my files. Man who's very much against bilingual education. And I saw Bill Clinton there, governor of Arkansas. And just an amazing moment when he walked into the room. It was like there was a halo over and sunshine. It was amazing, Larry. I didn't know who the man was, but it was like he walked and the waters parted. And he spoke and whatnot. And when I came back, this is a true story. When I came back and I was meeting with my colleagues, I said, there's this guy, from Arkansas I said, I think this guy's going to be president someday.
Yeah.
And I mean, I might have been 3 or 4 years, he is president. It was like, but I'll never forget the experience of him walking into the room and just, I mean, he was like he was bathed in light. It was amazing.
Well, as long as we're on the subject of Bill Clinton, there's kind of 3 brushes with presidents in Carpinteria Valley. One was Clinton when he came, and the other was, Reagan came.
Reagan was over here at the Nugget. Both of them did.
Can you tell me a little bit about those 2 stories?
I'm not sure what. All I know is that Clinton, of course, stayed over here on those Hollywood people.
Bloodworth Thomases.
What were they?
The Bloodworth Thomases.
The Thomases.
Yeah.
And so he was where we're at right now, almost directly across the freeway. And I know he went and played the saxophone at the Nugget restaurant, and so they've got a picture of him. It's kind of funny because you've got a picture of Reagan at the Nugget having his burger, along with Clinton next to him playing the saxophone on the wall there. That's kind of neat. And of course, at that time, I mean, because Clinton was around here, Warren Christopher, what was he, the Secretary of State? He would ride his bike right through here, and of course all the entourage of all the Secret Service men and whatever, as he's riding his bicycle, kind of disrupting Via Real. And of course Reagan, I believe, also walked through Carpinteria at the time that of all the flooding, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Crest de Alba, who was one of our Mexican-American school board members, I think escorted him throughout Carpinteria, so that he could see the damage, and then I guess they...
Do you know which flood that was? Was that 69, 70?
I think so.
Yeah.
Can we take a time out?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to stop the tape. That was good. So you said one reason why Betty was successful with them was...
Well, okay. If you think that's important, yeah, well, say that. But
it was the expectation.
Her expectations were completely different than the expectations that the rest of the teachers had. That's why. Am I on camera?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why I say that when the kids started coming in to the kindergarten programs out of that preschool program, they said, "These kids are smart. They know their stuff." That wasn't the expectation. For Betty, that was absolutely the expectation. That's what she was used to. She wasn't going to settle for anything less. I think that was critical to the success of that program.
I think one thing Tara was talking about was there a proposition in the mid-90s, a state proposition that outlawed bilingual education? Oh,
yeah. What was that? Yeah, she is correct. Yes, she was. But it really didn't stop things, I think it just officially, the bilingual education name, I think, just kind of went, but the practices didn't change all that much, and there was a lot of experimentation going on by the 1990s. I mean, they were doing dual language immersion programs, which we never attempted. It would have been natural for us to have done something like that, but I think, as I saw it, it was kind of far beyond what we were capable of doing within, the Carpinteria elementary schools, and I'm sure people will disagree with me on that, that it could be done. But I really wasn't at the forefront of that,
Well, let's get to the main school closing. What's the story about that, and what were the pros and cons?
Well,
and I don't need too much detail. But.
Okay, as I'm not sure from what angle to speak to this. As I said to you in the warm-up to this taping, it was a real disappointment, to see the school be closed. It's still a disappointment to a lot of people. The community did not want to see the school closed, but there were some interesting things that happened. The behind-the-scenes kind of stuff. The population of children entering school was beginning to shrink.
About what year was this?
We began to see a decline in the numbers in the 2000s because the district had been climbing for a long time, and all of a sudden it began to go down the other way, incrementally, but it was getting smaller, and the number of kids that were entering kindergarten. So obviously it was affecting the number of hires that could be made. You didn't need as many kindergarten teachers if there weren't as many kindergarten kids. Some of those people were if they had their tenure, were being shifted into other grades, and so it affected the hiring practices, obviously. But there was an interesting shift because when we had, which one of the principals? Not Rob Barbeau, the one, I can see his face, he lived not far from me. Anyways, a superintendent came in from Ojai, I think it was the one from Ojai, that wanted to make a bunch of small elementary schools in Carpinteria, which I thought was a great idea. Every school was going to be a main school. Main school was a small 300, 400 student school. So he wanted to break down the great big Canalino school and make that a small school like Maine, shrink Aliso a little bit too in population, and then create 2 new schools. So we would have one school on the Baylord, what they call Legoland, whatever. What do we call that? Legoland. So
the condos out there.
The condos. Yeah. So a small school was going to be built there, which had actually been promised for me. I was going to get that school and be able to raise something from the ground, which would have been a whole lot of fun, brand new school. And then they wanted also to have the school here on Toro Canyon. I'm pointing over there in the camera because we are just a street over from Toro Canyon. So Toro Canyon would have had a small elementary school which would have housed the Summerland kids as well as the kids in this area. The Legoland area, the Baylord property, that was another school that would have had all the kids on that side of the valley. And then the 3 schools that were currently being operated would have all the kids in the middle of the community. But every one of the schools was going to be a small, homey school. So it's interesting that we went from that position, and of course there was opposition to these 2 new schools immediately, and the people, my neighbors here, who I usually side with on most issues, but not on this issue, they were dead set against having a school on the Toro Canyon land, and so they got that stopped, and so no school was ever built. And then the Baylord property never took off either. So nothing happened with all of that. Now, the number of kids entering the school system is becoming less and less. And so we get a new superintendent, and I was one of the candidates for superintendent. Didn't win, obviously. And the guy that comes in is one that wants to do the exact opposite. So you got Paul Cordero, who came in and he wanted to create a super big school. And I guess that's what he sold to the school board, and they hired him for it. They thought he had a plan for it. And from the first time I met him, I knew that he was going to close the school. I mean, his body language and the things he said to me, it was like, my school's gone. And I was principal at Maine. Here we are, a distinguished school. I thought we were the best school in the district, and he's going to close us down. And his idea again is, this is a direct quote, we're going to have what did he call it? One
super school?
One shit-kicking school.
That's what he called it?
That's how he described it. You know, we're going to make a school that's got every program possible, and we're going to house all the kids there. So I'm not sure if in the back of his mind he might have even thought of closing Aliso. I'm not sure, but we for sure were going to go, and Summerlin had enough always political clout to keep itself open. So I guess they were going to be safe. But I always felt that an alternate solution would have been just to combine Main School with Summerland. We had all the facilities that Summerlin did not have, and if they wanted to keep their kids together, they could come, they could have their kids bused over. They were bused anyways. There was a bus that picked kids up from Summerlin anyhow, so why not just have them brought over to our school? There was only 40 of them, kids, I mean very few children, and we had the library, best library going. We had a state-of-the-art computer lab. We had a playground, and they were shrinking us, so we could easily have absorbed those children and let them maintain their identity within the school. We could have had them grouped together, just like they were grouped over there, and saved money that way. Anyway, I think that would have been a good solution. So anyways, Cordero had dealings with the teachers union and convinced them that they could get raises if they closed main school. And one of my teachers, who had been transferred to another school and was president of the teachers union at the time, was very apologetic because he didn't want to see main school closed, but he said, it's my obligation to help, the teachers, get their needs taken care of, and we're promised that we'll get our raises and all this. If we close the school, we've got to close it. Or rather, we can't support it being open. So, some of the stuff that the school board members were saying, well, the teachers union supports it, whatever. People were getting their allies or whatever, to make this move. I retired at the end of the 2006 year, and one of my goals was, as I said to you in the warm-up too, there were a lot of reasons why I retired when I did, but one of them was to be able to save main school. And I couldn't do that as an employee of the district, so I had to do that as just a citizen. And to be a citizen, I couldn't be I couldn't be a part of the school district. So I retired. That was one of the reasons. And I was very, very involved in pushing the candidacy of people that were in support of keeping the school open. And it was, as we went door to door advocating for our candidates, the enthusiasm for keeping Main School was high. The community did not want to see Main School closed.
And why was that? They wanted a local school for their kids to go to, or what were the reasons?
I think, I'm guessing here, one, obviously, the legacy from a lot of Carpinterians, old-time Carpinterians, love of their schools is very strong, loyalty to their schools, and so people who had attended Main School did not want to see Main School closed. But also, as we walked areas like Serena Park, where we're in right now, and talked, they liked the concept of small schools. And so the idea that the original superintendent had of having the smaller schools was definitely a selling point for parents sending their children. They didn't want to send them to super big schools. So they, I think, also saw that losing one school meant another one was going to get ballooned up. And they didn't seem to like that idea. So anyways, the support that we got was really high. And when, yes?
Was it also a Hispanic thing? Did Hispanics want Main School to stay open more than others?
I don't remember it being a Hispanic issue.
Okay.
Have you heard to the contrary?
I just seem to remember a lot of Hispanic people protesting the closure of it.
Yeah, well, I think it's because, well, also what was happening at that time is that we were really losing the white population out of the schools. And a lot of them were sending their kids to private schools and stuff. As Maine school, at the time of its closure, was 90-something% Hispanic, Latino. And Aliso wasn't that much removed from that either. So it seems that the number of kids that were in the schools, in the elementary schools, were almost all Mexican or Mexican-American children. And I think that's kind of reversed itself a little. I think when I started at Maine School in 1993 or 4, it was a 50-50 school. By the time I left, it was like 90-something against maybe 5% white, and then a couple of blacks and a couple of Asians. You know, that's about what the school was. And again, Aliso wasn't all that different at the time. So maybe you call it a Latino issue just because, but those are the parents that were in the schools.
Okay.
So anyways, and we won the election and won the battle and lost the war because we thought we had the 3-2 board split to keep the school open.
Who would that have been? Who are the 3 and who are the 2?
I think if people can look that up,
okay.
they can. You know, I'm not going to disparage the person that switched sides. But we thought we had the 3 to keep the school open, and we found out that we didn't. But I will add that the one person that ran on school closure as a part of what he would do got very few votes in the election. You know, he got, what, 10-15% of the vote? You know, overwhelmingly, the candidates that were perceived as keeping Maine School open won by landslide margins. And one of those people was a virtual unknown who ran on a single issue, keeping Maine School open. So,
to change the subject, what comes to mind as the big issues in the last 50 years of either, other than what you've spoken about, either in the schools or in Carpinteria in general?
the big issues.
Or like the big news stories?
Well, if we go to agriculture, I think the avocado is a big one. The city of Carpinteria, the community of Carpinteria, excuse me, was initially, at least when the gold miners began to go away from the gold fields, not having made their fortune and starting to come down the coast and finding this idyllic spot in Carpinteria, which was the stable ground of the Santa Barbara community. The Santa Barbara itself, in the 1840s and 50s, it was dominated by the Californios. And so, I mean, you have all of the city, rather all the big, the founding fathers of that area, which were all families that came with the soldiers that had come across initially. And, you know, we have all the streets named after them, Coda, Carrillo, whatever, you know, all these streets, De La Guerra. Those families lived in Santa Barbara, and they lived in Montecito. Montecito was always the kind of the place where the wealthiest lived. Carpinteria was the livery stable or whatever. This was a place where they kept all the animals, where they kept, where they grew their food, their vegetables and things. Anyways, going from a horseman's kind of an area, after the drought of 1860, they had a big flood, and then there was a drought for 20 years, and they had to change to a completely agrarian economy. The gold miners, again, and their families had come into this area, and this area was populated basically by Anglos. When I look at Carpinteria, as I look at the history, it just doesn't look to me like it really had that many Latino families. It was mostly the whites that created Carpinteria. But anyways, you asked, what are the big developments? When they went to the lima beans, because they had very little water, and it was a plant that could grow with little water, when the rains finally began to come and they began to diversify and became, more into the walnuts and the lemons and all that stuff, the lemons took over. This place became a big lemon area. And by 1912, C.D. Hubbard opens the first lemon packing house. 26, the Mutual opens, and it continues. So we now have 2 packing houses. By the 30s, the lemon is king. And
By the 1930s.
oh, by the 1930s, lemons are making money. And this is during the Depression. One of the things that I've learned in interviewing ranchers, both the people that were picking the fruit and people that were growing it, is that Carpinteria did not suffer during the Depression. Money was being made. The only people that suffered was that many of the growers wanted to pay Depression prices because so many people were actually being affected by the Depression that they could pay their workers less money because everybody was looking for work. So
back to avocados, though.
So the avocado, we're getting to them. I'm just very long-winded. Okay, by the 1940s, the growers, these are smart guys. The growers, the agricultural people were college educated. They all went to their agricultural colleges. UCLA had a big agricultural department. So did the University of California. A lot of these kids, these farmers' sons went to these schools and
like George
came back.
Bliss.
George Bliss would be one, yes. Anyways, these guys in the 1940s can see that the lemons played out and that it's time to go to another crop. And so the avocado had been experimented with as early as the 1880s and 90s. Jar McCartan was one of the first of the avocado people.
My tape's running out. Let me.
Okay, well, you want me to do this real fast?
Okay, yeah.
I'll just say that in the 40s then, the avocado starts getting cultivated. By the 60s, lemons are in less need. The packing houses are beginning to merge with each other, and everybody goes to the avocado. And the avocado, it becomes a huge thing in the 60s. It's our cash crop at that point.
Okay, we got that. That was good. And avocado in 60s became our cash crop.
That and the nurseries.